The Great Ruler Episode 124 Explanation. When the 8 teams made their appearance on the Golden Battle Stairs, deafening cheers resounded in this region. Whether or not it be the teams that represented their spiritual academy who made it into the finals, they all held great expectations for the final battle that was about to begin. All in all, these 8 teams before their eyes had risen above the countless spiritual academies. Thus, speaking from a certain degree, their strength represented the stronger fighting power amongst the academies. The 5 great deans who were seated on the sky overlooked the Golden Battle Stairs, with the exception that every single one of them wore a different expression. A dense smile had long replaced the indifferent expression on Dean Taikang's face as his heart was similarly engulfed in astonishment and surprise. He wasn't surprised by the fact that Mu Chen's team could make it to the finals, he just never expected Mu Chen to achieve such a feat in the elimination round. Ha, looks like there is a fresh talent emerging from your Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy in this tournament as well, Dean Taikang. Dean Wu of the Martial Spiritual Academy shot a glance at Mu Chen as he spoke with an eye-narrowing smile. They are just lucky. That Wu Ling of your school doesn't look simple either. I'm guessing that they are trying to hide their strength and, thus, did not compete for the best 3. Am I right? Dean Taikang responded with a smile as the joy between his brows leaked out. After all, it was years since their Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy achieved such results. From the looks of it, Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy seems to have improved. Dean Qiansheng, who was quiet this whole time, let out a faint smile at this moment as he continued, Dean Taikang, I bid my congratulations to you. The smile on Dean Qiansheng's face was indifferent with abstruse eyes, no one could tell what he was thinking. From the looks of it, he didn't seem too affected by the fact that Ji Xian wasn't able to obtain the first place. Dean Qiansheng must be joking, it doesn't mean anything since it was only the elimination round. Although Dean Qiansheng was an old fox, Dean Taikang wasn't someone that's easy to mess with as well as he spoke with a smile. But no matter how powerful the opponents are, my Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy will spare no effort. How expecting? Dean Qiansheng responded with a smile as he nodded his head. He shifted his gaze onto the 3 remaining deans and spoke, since the best 8 are already here, shall we proceed to the finals? The 3 deans nodded upon hearing his words. Looking at their response, Dean Qiansheng stood up from his throne, which was made from light. In comparison to the vast heavens and earth, his silhouette was especially small. But not knowing why the instant he stood up, it felt like he was overlooking the heavens and earth, unleashing might which was beyond any ability to describe. Under that terrifying might, the cheers that were resounding in this region fell into silence in an instant as countless revered gazes were looking at him. Mu Chen, who stood at the top of the Golden Battle Stairs, was also looking at the white-robed figure with his head raised. The might that was emitted from him made his heart jolt and felt his mind sway. That's the true power of experts. Compared to that level, there was a huge gap between them. However, he wasn't dismayed by that, because he knew that it was just a matter of time to temper himself to that level. Firstly, I would like to congratulate those who managed to get into the best 8. No matter what the outcome will be, you are already outstanding amongst all the spiritual academies. Dean Qiansheng's voice was faint as it contained sound waves that caused a fine trembling between the heavens and earth, even the spiritual energy in everyone's bodies was trembling along with it. The elimination round has already come to an end, and now, we will soon start our final battle. Only the person who rises amongst the others in the final battle can be the strongest amongst the innumerable spiritual academies, he will represent the apex of all academies. A multitude had their blood boiled as they heard his speech. The apex was a spot that held unreachable glory for them, and right now, there were only 8 teams that could fight it out for that glory. Every single one in the champion team will receive 1,000 drops of sovereign spiritual liquid and a sovereign elixir. Whoosh! His words caused an uproar as many people had their eyes reddened. They were well aware what the sovereign spiritual liquid represented. It was something that was indispensable to ascend the sovereign realm. Even for some clans, 1,000 drops of sovereign spiritual liquid was not a small amount. Moreover, the sovereign elixirs were extremely rare, since it was reported that only sovereign spiritual liquid that had been refined to the limits could be formed into elixirs, having a price tag comparable to a low-rank divine artifact. Everyone was well aware that even if they did manage to get through the third-grade spirit disaster, they still required the support of a huge amount of sovereign spiritual liquid. Not to mention that it wasn't 100% success rate. The moment they failed, the sovereign spiritual liquid that they had stockpiled would all be for naught. Although a sovereign elixir still couldn't guarantee an absolute success, it increased the success rate by several folds. The miracle effect was even more precious compared to a divine artifact for them who had not reached the sovereign realm. Sovereign elixir, what generosity! Even Mu Chen exclaimed in admiration. Due to the fact that he had the spiritual condensing bowl, although 1,000 sovereign spiritual liquid was still very attractive for him, it still was insufficient to leave him stunned to this level. But his heart was jolting when he heard the sovereign elixir. It should be a reward pooled by the 5 great spiritual academies, making this tournament worthy of participating. Luo Li smiled as she stood by his side. Although the sovereign elixir was extremely precious, it wasn't to an extent to make her moved. You're the future empress of the Luo god clan. A fulfilled empress has no idea how starved her husband is. Mu Chen teased. Luo Li helplessly shot an enraged look at him. The flirtatious expression what was unintentionally revealed by her made the minds of others shake. Even those gazes gathered on her from outside the golden battle stage lit up. When Mu Chen's heart was also shaken by her expression, he sensed a cold gaze staring at him. Turning his head over, he saw Ji Xian staring in his direction. At this moment, Ji Xian's face was covered with a layer of chill, no longer having the gentle expression he had in the past. Clearly, he had fallen into a pit this time. Originally, he thought that he already had Mu Chen stomped beneath him with that surge of 50,000 points at the last minute, but his contentment didn't last long as he saw Mu Chen's points soaring at a terrifying speed, surpassing him before he could firmly sit on the numero uno ranking. Within his raging and shaken heart, Ji Xian's pride was clearly broken. If it wasn't for the strand of rationale that he held, he might have lost control and attacked one of the best 8 to seize their points. However, Mu Chen did not give him much time to plan as 8 academy plaques amongst the top 16 were already ignited when he surpassed Ji Xian. Who would have thought that when Ji Xian attempted to use his schemes on Mu Chen, he'd smash his own feet instead of with a rock when he chose to end the elimination round and determined his points. Although the ranking in the elimination round was completely unrelated from the contest over the championship title, in the end, the feeling of being stepped on still filled Ji Xian's heart with rage. He had never suffered such a huge loss in his life, even his confrontation with Mu Chen in the spiritual road ended with him as the winner. Mu Chen looked at Ji Xian's cold gaze as he replied with a smile and cupped his hands, "Thanks for that." Hearing Mu Chen's words, Ji Xian felt suffocation in his heart as his breathing became heavy, even the movements on his face lessened with his gaze turning colder. "It's still a little early for you to be complacent." Ji Xian sneered, "Just hope you don't encounter me in the first round. Otherwise, you might not even get into the best 4. I'll return your words unchanged." Mu Chen smiled as an eerie light spun in his black pupils, "But rest assured, I will have a good fight with you this time. It seems like our previous fight gave you a little too much confidence." The corner of Ji Xian's lips rose as he continued, "You have to be more careful. Otherwise, it will be painful when you fall with such high confidence. Don't fall to your death." Mu Chen shrugged. The exchange between the two was filled with chill, making the confrontation in their words obvious. Luo Li quietly stood beside Mu Chen as she shot an indifferent glance to Ji Xian with her clear eyes. Although she did not speak, the supportive attitude she had of Mu Chen made the veins on Ji Xian's arm throb. "And now, we will draw lots to determine your opponent." Din Qianshen's voice in the sky resonated once again. He waved his sleeve as 8 light balls flew from his palm and hovered above the battle stage. "Pick for yourself." Inside the 8 light balls, there are colors classified in pairs. Those who obtained the same color will be your opponent. Hearing his voice, all those below raised their heads as the captains of the 8 teams made a suction gesture, pulling a light ball into their palms. The light ball hovered above Mu Chen's hand. He gave Luo Li, Shen Sangsheng, and the rest a glance as all of them lightly nodded their heads at him. "Ha!" Mu Chen lightly breathed out a mouthful of white mist as his eyes turned sharp. He clenched his fist and caused the light ball to explode. As the light ball exploded, a pillar died in a scarlet red that looked like flames soared into the sky from his palm. At the same time, the remaining 7 teams crushed their light balls, and along with that, 7 light pillars soared. All the gazes in this region were nervously directed at them. 8 dazzling pillars of light soared into the horizon that looked to have even pierced through the layers of clouds, clearly seen within a radius of 100 miles. 8 pillars colored in red, green, black and yellow. The sight of the 8 pillars intertwining was extremely spectacular. Everyone's eyes were fixed to the 8 pillars of light as waves of uproars burst out with dense expectation contained in their voices. Mu Chen had also directed his gaze at the sky following the uproar. His eyes were fixed onto the other red light and slowly moved his gaze along it and stopped at a team donned in green robes. The captain of that particular team, Liu Qingyun, stood with his hand behind his back as his gaze was also staring at Mu Chen and his team. Their opponent was the team from the Azure Sky Spiritual Academy. Shen Sangsheng and the rest of the team inwardly felt relieved. It was a miracle that they did not encounter Wen Qingxian, Wu Ling, and the rest. After all, they had a decent relationship with them, thus meeting them and having any one of them eliminated wasn't something that they wanted to see. Speaking from a certain angle, the team from the Azure Sky Spiritual Academy was part of Ji Xian's alliance and could be considered as their enemy. Now that they were facing off, it was a good time to teach them a lesson. They were well aware that Liu Qingyun helped Ji Xian threaten Mu Chen. If it wasn't for the fact that the latter possessed a similar means, they might have been in a bad situation. Mu Chen shifted his gaze from Liu Qingyun's team as he looked at the battle allocation and was slightly stunned when he discovered that the opponent of Ji Xian's team was the undefeated Spiritual Academy represented by Wen Busheng. Amongst the best 8, the undefeated Spiritual Academy's strength was probably the weakest. Generally speaking, it was impossible for a Spiritual Academy of such strength to get into the best 8. However, Wen Busheng achieved this feat, and no matter what the results might be, he would still be the glory of their undefeated Spiritual Academy. Mu Chen looked towards Wen Busheng. The latter's expression was, as usual, he wasn't in dismay from the fact that he had such a thorny opponent like Ji Xian as his first opponent. At this time, there was no way Mu Chen could help him, except to cheer for him in his heart. Wen Qingxuan's opponent was the 9 Cauldron Spiritual Academy led by Fang Yun, who was once defeated by Luo Li. The last group made Mu Chen feel a little surprised, since it was between Wu Ling of the Martial Spiritual Academy and Shui Qianhe of the Blood God Academy. Mu Chen did not have any favorable feelings for Shui Qianhe, and he even had a hint of killing intent for the latter, since the latter was clearly aiming for Luo Li. As a person, Shui Qianhe was rather crafty, since he had never revealed his true strength in the elimination round. But, even so, his strength was well proven by the fact that he could still make it into the best 8. Likewise, Wu Ling wasn't someone to mess with. Similar to Shui Qianhe, he had also concealed his strength in the elimination round, since he had never thoroughly displayed his strength. Right now, the 2 fellows who had deeply concealed their strengths were allocated to face off against each other. Just thinking about it, the outcome of that battle must be a little confusing. What luck, meeting Ji Xian in the first round. The teammate standing at the rear of Wen Busheng spoke with a bitter expression. We have already profited from the fact that we made it to the best 8. Wen Busheng smiled as he fixed his gaze on Ji Xian. There wasn't a hint of fear in his eyes, on the contrary, there was a blazing fighting intent surging within. We just need to do our best. It wasn't easy for us to make it this far. So, at the very least, we should fight for the honor for our undefeated Spiritual Academy. Seeing how unperturbed Wen Busheng was, the emotions of his teammates calmed down as they grinned. Indeed, it was already out of everyone's expectations with the fact that they could make it to the best 8. So it didn't matter if they win or lose, they just needed to give their best, since there was nothing to lose. Good, let us experience how powerful the team representing the Saint Spiritual Academy is. An opponent defeated by Luo Li. Wen Qingxian leisurely shot a glance at Fang Yun's team as she lightly flung her mouth aside as she spoke to the 4 flowers standing behind her, "Don't lose my face. If you guys lose, HMPH, don't blame me for being ruthless when we return to the Myriad Phoenix Spiritual Academy." She clenched her fists, but when she made the malicious expression with her charming face, it was exceptionally lovable and gorgeous instead. There wasn't any threat coming from her at all. Hee, we got it. Hearing her words, Le, Pinner and the rest showed lovely smiles. Their smiles were like flowers as they shook the hearts of others. But when Fang Yun's team saw their response to the results, they bitterly smiled inwardly. Even Fang Yun's face wasn't too good as he had also felt the pressure of facing Wen Qingxian as an opponent. The Blood God Academy. Mu Ling narrowed his eyes as he looked at the team dressed in blood-red long robes and at the face that was as delicate as a girl as he muttered. Not knowing why he felt a faint danger from Shui Qianhe. Those fellows don't seem that simple. Wu Yingying said with a heavy expression behind Wu Ling. At this time, their team had been reorganized at the last moment and thus, this was the reason why Wu Yingying was here together with them. Wu Ling nodded his head as he lightly flicked his 10 fingers and replied with a calm expression on his face, "Leave Shui Qianhe to me, you guys steadily bring out your abilities and try not to make any mistakes." Wu Yingying and the other 3 nodded their heads at his words. While the 8 teams were secretly examining their opponents on the Golden Battle Stairs, all sorts of whispers came from the students of the various academies outside the Golden Battle Stage. However, none of them could easily come to a conclusion. Although the best 8 were ranked, everyone was clear that it was just the elimination round. Thus, it was impossible for every single team to display all of their powers in that round, which simply meant that the numero uno of the elimination round might not end up as the champion. It wasn't a rare scene that the rank 8 of the elimination round would end up flipping the situation around and seize the championship. But, regardless, this final battle would definitely be absolutely interesting. Nearly everyone was curious which of the 8 teams would end up in the best 4. When the 5 great deans saw the allocation in the sky, they each had a different expression on their faces, but there wasn't any worry written on their faces since they were clearly confident in the teams that represented their academies. Since the allocation is done, the 8 teams can respectively stand on their stage. Dean Qiansheng's faint voice rang out as he waved his hand, splitting the colossal golden battle stage beneath him into 4 smaller golden battle stages. Every single stage was further separated into 5 pieces as the stage became covered in golden light, making it look like it was made from gold, looking extremely tough. The battle for the best 4 will be regulated in points of 7. Every team member that loses will lose a point and 3 for the captains, a total of 7 points. The team with the most points between the 2 will have the qualifications to ascend to the best 4. 7 points, the captains are actually worth 3 points. Mu Chen was a little startled. A total of 7 points and the captains alone would hold nearly half of them. Thus, the importance of the captain could be seen. Technically, as long as a team managed to defeat the captain, their victory would be nearly secured, unless the 4 other team members were defeated. Are you all clear? Dean Qiansheng overlooked from the sky as he spoke in a slow manner. The 8 teams nodded their heads in acknowledgement. Since that's the case, then go up to the stage. Dean Qiansheng waved his hand. Rustle. The 8 teams flew out at the same time and with several flickers, they landed on one of the 4 respective colossal golden battle stages under the countless excited gazes. Mu Chen's group of 5 appeared on the utmost left golden battle stage. "Leave Liu Qingyun to me," Mu Chen said as he looked at the rest. Their team was reorganized and, thus, the formation of their team wasn't any weaker than any of the other teams. In fact, with Luo Li, they were a little stronger. However, due to the 7 points rule, especially since the captains were worth more points, there was an element of uncertainness in this. The moment the captains were defeated, it was basically a loss for that team. Thus, Mu Chen had to deal with the strongest of the opposing team, Liu Qingyun, by himself. Despite understanding that Liu Qingyun wasn't an easy opponent, he still wouldn't fear any opponent at this point in time. "Be careful." Luo Li nodded her head as she warned. Liu Qingyun wasn't an easy opponent and was a genius from the Wind Spirit clan. It was definitely not easy to deal with a race that had such a long history. Mu Chen nodded his head in response. When Luo Li and the other 3 saw his reaction, they no longer spoke as they moved to the 4 other battle stages. Mu Chen stood on the colossal golden battle stage, alone, with a multitude of sky-shattering cheers bellowing in waves outside the stage. Whoosh! Screeches of wind rang out as an azure figure mysteriously appeared on this vast golden battle stage. Liu Qingyun stood with his hands behind his back as he shot an indifferent expression over as a faint smile was shown on his face. Mu Chen, I am here to halt your steps. Mu Chen, I have come to halt your steps. When Liu Qingyun spoke, an apathetic light shot from his eyes as he maintained an indifferent expression on his face. Perhaps no one would find it inappropriate for Liu Qingyun to speak of such words since he did have the capability to back those words up. Although Mu Chen was the numero uno for the elimination round, everyone knew that the final battle and the elimination round were entirely different. All 8 teams possessed peak-leveled strengths and every single one of the 8 captains wasn't people to be trifled with. No one could be guaranteed 100% victory in this kind of battle since the slightest mistake they made would have them ended up as a stepping stone for their opponent. Mu Chen smiled as he heard Liu Qingyun's words and clenched his fist, following with the appearance of his devouring dragon demonic spear. A surge of baleful aura was unleashed from him as he slowly lifted his spear, pointing the tip of it towards Liu Qingyun. Then, we'll have to see if Captain Liu is capable to achieve that. Mu Chen lightly smiled. There weren't any ripples in his voice and showed no signs of being enraged by Liu Qingyun's words. His heart was as calm as an abyssal pool. Liu Qingyun narrowed his eyes as the indifference on his face faded a little. He wasn't stupid and he had witnessed the fight between Mu Chen and Ji Xian. Thus, he had a little fear towards Mu Chen, since the latter's strength could be seen as evenly matched to his. The reason why he provoked Mu Chen was to attempt to break his calm since the slightest mistake made in this battle could make an entirely different result. However, it was a pity that his small tactics weren't useful. What a difficult opponent. Liu Qingyun smiled indifferently as his heart gradually calmed down. Whirling wind blew with the clench of his fist as the appearance of an azure light was rapidly gathering in his palm. Rustle. The azure light condensed into a halberd that was flickering in a similar azure luster in the hands of Liu Qingyun. As the halberd appeared, visible wind could be seen gathering around him. The tip of the halberd was constantly devouring the violent wind, sweeping up a gale at the tip of his halberd. Even the surrounding space had fine trembles to it. The might emitted from the halberd of azure light was even more ferocious compared to the devouring dragon demonic spear in Mu Chen's hand. Mu Chen's gaze flickered when he saw that the astonishing fluctuations emitting from Liu Qingyun's halberd weren't something a spiritual artifact could possess. Mu Chen slowly inhaled a mouthful of air as a sharpened luster rose in his black pupils. Long spear versus halberd. The confrontation between those two was equal in comparison. As the atmosphere between Mu Chen and Liu Qingyun seemed like daggers being drawn, ripples of spiritual energy were being unleashed from the other battle stages as mighty spiritual energy pressures were starting to spread out. Outside the battle stage, students from the various spiritual academies held their breaths as they watched the battles. Unconcealable excitement rose in their hearts as the battle of the best 8 would soon begin. No one could be certain which team would emerge into the best 4. Dawn! A clear and sharp bell rang out as it resonated between the heavens and earth. The instant the bell rang, the gaze of Mu Chen and Liu Qingyun grew sharp and, along with it, gales of powerful spiritual energy swept out from the two of them. Rustle. The two silhouettes stomped on the ground as their figures flew out like specters. Everyone could only see their blurry figures and, in the next instant, the two figures clashed in the colossal golden battle stage. Says she. The devouring dragon demonic spear furiously stabbed forth, enveloped in a baleful aura. It was like a ferocious beast pouncing on its prey. Under the powerful spiritual energy, the gale pierced through the atmosphere. On the opposite, the halberd lit in the azure light carried along the wind, and the tip of the halberd was flickering with ancient runes, giving a tint of mystery to it. Ding! The tips of the long spear and halberd clashed with great precision, creating sparks and visible ripples of spiritual energy that swept out. In an instant, they caused explosions in the surroundings. Pretty good spear you have there. Looking at the devouring dragon demonic spear held in Mu Chen's hand, Liu Qingyun lightly smiled as the corner of his lips rose. But, it's a pity. You shouldn't have clashed with me. Divine wind halberd, howling winds. A deep roar thundered from Liu Qingyun as the runes on the tip of his divine wind halberd flickered, creating a substantial gale as it swept out. The great power behind it forced Mu Chen to take a dozen steps back. Wind thrust. As Mu Chen moved back, Liu Qingyun looked as if he was one with the wind as he pounced at rapid speed. The illusions of the halberd that filled the sky integrated into the wind and soundlessly aimed for all the vital points on Mu Chen. Liu Qingyun's attacks were sharp and ferocious, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. Mu Chen's gaze grew heavy as he rapidly vibrated his arm, causing the devouring dragon demonic spear to sharply whistle as it turned into countless illusions of spears and shot forward, spreading throughout the space before him. Ding ding dang dang. Countless illusions of spears and halberds furiously clashed, and each time they clashed, an ear-piercing noise rang out along with it as sparks blossomed. Although the sight of it was beautiful, the danger held in it was fatal. Anyone could tell that neither Mu Chen nor Liu Qingyun held back in their attacks. Even if a spirit disaster expert were to be trapped in their attacks, that expert would probably be instantly pierced by them. In that short instant, the illusions of spears and halberds had already undergone thousands of clashes. The speed of them simply made everyone else dumbfounded. However, those with exceptionally keen eyes had their brows furrowed together as they realized that with each clash, Mu Chen's attacks were progressively being suppressed. Accurately speaking, it could be perhaps the spiritual aura that was emitting the baleful aura in Mu Chen's hand being suppressed by Liu Qingyun's halberd. Dang! Radiant azure light burst forth from the halberd illusions that abruptly filled the sky, and a 30-meter-sized storm shot forth. It was like a hurricane as it sped towards Mu Chen. The gaze of Mu Chen flickered as the devouring dragon demonic spear in his hands exploded in a scarlet blood-like luster. That surge of baleful aura was strengthened to the limits as a blood river swept out. Boom! The two attacks ferociously clashed, but at the moment of contact, the blood river collapsed as it was torn apart by the hurricane. Along with that, Mu Chen was also pushed back over 100 meters. Rustle. It was a scene of a complete uproar outside the stage. No one imagined that the numero uno of the rankings, Mu Chen, would be suppressed by Liu Qingyun in the first round of their confrontation. How is Liu Qingyun so powerful? Countless students of the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy were exchanging looks. Even the faces of Yi Qingling, Su Linga, and Yushi were filled with astonishment. Mu Chen's weapon was too weak. Lingxi spoke with an indifferent voice. With her keen eyes, she could naturally tell that the halberd in Liu Qingyun's hands that could beckon winds was a quasi-divine artifact, whereas Mu Chen's devouring dragon demonic spear was only a peerless rank spiritual artifact. In the confrontation of such a level, the perks from a quasi-divine artifact weren't insignificant enough to neglect. What's there that can be done? Sana spoke with a worried tone. What are you being anxious for? The show has just started. Lingxi lightly smiled as she patted Sana's tiny head. Her gaze, however, was directed at the slender silhouette on the stage. Standing on the golden battle stage, Mu Chen gave a glance at the devouring dragon demonic spear. It had been dulled and the baleful aura on it had also weakened. Evidently, it was damaged from their earlier confrontation. Liu Qingyun lightly readjusted his halberd as he gave Mu Chen a smile. Looks like I have the advantage this time. Finishing his speech, he flew up into the air as boundless spiritual energy swept forth from his body as he poured an earth-shattering amount of spiritual energy into his divine wind halberd. Buzz buzz. Hundreds of storms were seen forming behind Liu Qingyun. It was like a wind dragon issuing its roar, displaying its desire to rip the heavens and earth apart. Divine wind halberd, sky-devouring wind dragon. Liu Qingyun's gaze was cold as the halberd flew out of his hand, engulfed in azure light as it absorbed the storms and shaped them into a colossal wind dragon of about 300 meters. The wind dragon looked extremely realistic, with detailed scales that covered its colossal body and whirling hurricanes from its roar. Its savage appearance made the color of countless others change. What was most shocking was the fact that there was a dragon aura being emitted from the wind dragon. Clearly, the reason behind it should be the divine wind halberd, since the blood essence of the dragon clan must have been added during its forging. Go? Liu Qingyun stood midair as he pointed his finger down with a gaze covered in chill. Row? The azure wind dragon roared as its body flashed. The speed of it was unfathomable as a huge shadow had already descended upon Mu Chen. A violent hurricane that looked as if it could tear apart the heavens and earth caused a distortion in the space around the stage. Everyone's hearts trembled from the sight of Liu Qingyun's absolutely shocking attack. Is this the finals? It is truly a tournament that only those extraordinary people could participate. Would Mu Chen be able to hang on? Every single gaze was looking at the tiny figure that was shrouded by the huge shadow of the winged dragon. Under the countless gazes, Mu Chen raised his head as he looked at the incoming winged dragon. He deeply inhaled a mouthful of air as his gaze gradually turned cold. Quasi-divine artifact. He muttered as he formed seals with his hands in the next instant. A scarlet light swept out from the depths of his black pupils. Buzz. A sound like a roar of a detestable demon from the primordial resounded between the heavens and earth. Everyone could see a black ray of light soaring into the skies from Mu Chen's head. In the black pillar of light, an enormous demonic pillar soared. Mu Chen took a step forth as he hugged the air, looking as if he was embracing the heavens and earth. Lightning flickered on his arms and his veins were wiggling like earthworms. Since the demonic spear doesn't work, let's try and see if my demonic pillar can suppress you. The demonic pillar, which was emitting an abyss amount of baleful aura, swept down at this instant. The baleful aura from the devouring dragon demonic spear paled in comparison to this pillar. At this instant, everyone had widened their eyes bit by bit. The black-colored demonic pillar fell as it heavily struck against the wind dragon that was whistling over in its direction. The black demonic pillar brandished down, issuing a sound that sounded like a demon dragon's roar. Along with a terrifying power that even the heavens and earth could not withstand, it heavily struck against the body of the incoming wind dragon. Dong! In that instant of collision, a deep ear-piercing sound rang across the horizon. Thereafter, it carried along a violent wind as it wreaked havoc. Fine cracks began to appear on the golden battle stage that seemed to be forged from gold. Clearly, the battle stage was forged with a special material that made it extremely firm. Even if a spirit disaster expert were to attack the stage with their full power, it would still be tough to damage it. But right now, the confrontation between Mu Chen and Liu Qingyun created cracks on that very same stage. Thus, one could infer how powerful the impact was. Row! A dreadful gale wreaked havoc as the Azure Wind Dragon issued a mournful roar. Its radiant azure eyes were being suppressed by the black light at this instant. Faint changes occurred on Liu Qingyun's face as well. Bang! Mu Chen maintained a calm expression with his gesture of embracing the air as if he was hugging the colossal Great Meru demonic pillar as it swung it down once again. As the demonic pillar was brandished down, it caused explosions in the space. Boom! The Azure Wind Dragon finally could not withstand the dreadful power of the demonic pillar as it was sent flying away. The azure light flickered as the dragon exploded. An azure light shot back as it fell into Liu Qingyun's hands, returning back to the form of a halberd. Liu Qingyun firmly grasps onto the divine wind halberd, but the power behind it had made him take several steps back before he could suppress the impact with his spiritual energy. Lowering his head, he saw the divine wind halberd shrouded in traces of a baleful aura. The baleful aura was exceptionally violent as if it was eroding the halberd in his hands. HMPH. Liu Qingyun made a cold snort as he poured the spiritual energy in his body into it in waves. The body of the halberd trembled as it dissipated the eroding baleful aura. Liu Qingyun raised his head and saw Mu Chen standing still on his original spot with the colossal demonic pillar hovering above his head as the baleful aura was endlessly emitting from the demonic pillar, almost like a pillar of the demonic gods. What a good ominous artifact! The deans of various spiritual academies in midair were startled in their hearts. They could naturally sense the astonishing baleful aura coming from the Great Meru demonic pillar. Clearly, it had a history behind it. The ancient boundless feeling that it was giving off was definitely not something that an ordinary divine artifact could rival against. However, the Great Meru demonic pillar seemed to be in a sealed state at the moment. Otherwise, the quasi-divine artifact of Liu Qingyun, the divine wind halberd, would definitely be gravely corroded by it. Outside the battle stage, countless students were filled with astonishment. No wonder Mu Chen could rise above others amongst the countless spiritual academies and stand in the best 8. He truly was terrifying. Such a confrontation could already be considered as the peak amongst those in their age. No wonder even Ji Xian has fears against you. On the battle stage, Liu Qingyun looked at Mu Chen with a cold, piercing gaze. He tightened his grip on the divine wind halberd as his expression turned grave. He knew that if he wanted to defeat Mu Chen, he could no longer hold back any of his strength. Ha! Liu Qingyun inhaled a deep mouthful of chilled air as his eyes gradually turned jade green as an azure-colored spiritual energy swept out in waves, engulfing the heavens and earth in an instant. Azure spiritual energy covered the skies, along with faint ripples that looked like steam that was quietly residing in midair. But, despite how quiet it was, those students with keen eyes had their faces changed. They sensed a skin-chilling fluctuation spreading out in the sky. Everyone felt the spiritual energy pressure as they lightly smacked their lips. The power of his spiritual energy had already gone through third-grade spirit disaster. Liu Qingyun was indeed powerful. Mu Chen, you're truly not bad. Liu Qingyun's figure slowly rose into the sky as he became shrouded within the boundless azure spiritual energy. His jade-green pupils looked as if there were tornadoes forming in them as he stared at Mu Chen. Thus, to show that I am taking you seriously, I will use the strength of our Wind Spirit clan to defeat you. Mu Chen's black pupils were staring at Liu Qingyun as well. He naturally sensed the piercing ripples fluctuating behind the latter as his spiritual energy felt as sharp as a blade, spreading to every corner of this space. The spiritual energy that Liu Qingyun obtained from his cultivation was different, to some extent, when compared to ordinary spiritual energy. The power behind his spiritual energy was stronger, which showed that the spiritual art that he had cultivated it wasn't a simple one. This must be the wind spiritual energy of the Wind Spirit clan. Rumor has it that only those who belong to the Wind Spirit clan can cultivate it. The attacking power of it is extremely powerful and it isn't something ordinary spiritual energy can resist. A few deans slightly nodded their heads in the air. Generally speaking, only after stepping into the sovereign realm would one experience changes in spiritual energy. Prior to that, the majority of the spiritual energy was similar. Unless they had cultivated a special cultivating technique, but those were secrets that belonged to those mighty clans that ordinary people wouldn't know about. Thus, if ordinary people were to confront those belonging to those clans, they would definitely be at a disadvantage in terms of spiritual energy confrontation. For ordinary spiritual energy, in order to hold the advantage, they would have to fork out spiritual energy that was several times more in order to achieve such an unusual spiritual energy suppression. The special spiritual energy of the Wind Spirit clan. Mu Chen muttered to himself as he narrowed his eyes. His hands started to form peculiar seals, the seals of the Great Pagoda art. The Great Pagoda art was a mysterious cultivating technique left behind by his mother. It was extremely profound to the point that Mu Chen still couldn't completely comprehend it. However, the spiritual energy produced from the Great Pagoda art was remarkable. Since Liu Qingyun intended to compete with spiritual energy, then Mu Chen wouldn't mind giving it a try and compare the Wind Spirit clan's wind spiritual energy and his Great Pagoda art, which was more superior. Boom! A black and white mix of spiritual energy swept out from Mu Chen's body as he finished his hand seals. The black and white spiritual energy whistled through the heavens and earth as they mixed together, similar to the fusion of yin and yang. Compared to Liu Qingyun's piercing wind spiritual energy, the Great Pagoda spiritual energy didn't show too many offensive characteristics. However, as it whistled, a surge of profundity started to spread out. He's going to use the Great Pagoda art? When Lingxi saw that scene, her eyes lit up. Ever since she passed the yin scroll of the Great Pagoda art to Mu Chen, she had never seen him execute the completed Great Pagoda art. Although she knew that the Wind Spirit clan was a considerable clan, even amongst those in the Great Thousand World, compared to the primordial clan behind Aunt Jing, it paled into insignificance in comparison. In midair, when Liu Qingyun saw the majestic black and white spiritual energy behind Mu Chen, he slightly narrowed his eyes. Although the latter's spiritual energy didn't seem too special, he vaguely felt an abnormal fluctuation coming from it. The spiritual energy cultivated by Mu Chen doesn't seem like the ordinary ones. When that thought flashed through Liu Qingyun's mind, he quickly suppressed that thought. He couldn't afford to have his mind wandering around at this moment as he refused to believe that Mu Chen could resist the wind spiritual energy of their Wind Spirit clan. No matter what other means you have, I will definitely emerge victorious in this battle. Liu Qingyun spoke in a deep voice. In the battle between their two teams, his match here was the crucial one as Mu Chen's team still had Luo Li and she would definitely win her match. Perhaps the others might not be able to achieve results like her, there wasn't a high chance in their victory. The ones called Shen Songsheng and Li Xiantong were very powerful as well. Thus, unless he was capable of defeating Mu Chen, it was basically impossible for their team to get into the best four. He definitely had to win this battle. Liu Qingyun's gaze grew heavy as he spat a mouthful of white mist from his mouth, and formed seals with both of his hands. He couldn't afford to hold himself back, even in the slightest. Mu Chen, if you are truly capable, then try to receive this attack of mine. Liu Qingyun rapidly formed his seals and at this instant, the torrential azure spiritual energy swept out, turning into countless rays of light as it turned into a colossally complicated rune with the size of a few thousand meters up in the sky. From the looks of it, those runes appeared to be a spiritual array, but at the same time, there weren't any ripples of a spiritual array. Hoof. A mouthful of blood essence was spewed from Liu Qingyun's mouth as it went into the colossal light array. Divine Wind Art, requesting image of the Wind Ancestor. Liu Qingyun's expression was grave as he kowtowed towards the light array. Buzz says. As Liu Qingyun kowtowed, violent winds started to sweep between the heavens and earth as everyone was startled to see gigantic tornadoes forming. They were wreaking havoc between the heavens and earth, emitting fearsome destructive powers at the same time. Mu Chen's gaze was fixed onto the colossal light array as an azure light suddenly soared into the skies. Within the azure light, a huge azure light image slowly took form. The instant that azure light image appeared, an indescribable pressure started to spread throughout the heavens and earth. Some deans in midair had their faces uncontrollably changed as they nervously stared at the azure light figure as their gazes fluctuated, along with mutters from their mouths. To actually be able to summon the ancestor of the Wind Spirit clan, the Wind Ancestor's spiritual image, out, that kid from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy is in trouble. This episode ends here. Thanks you for watching.